No one expected Melania Trump's name to explode across headlines again. Not like this. But when journalist and author Michael Wolff filed a lawsuit accusing the former First Lady of deliberately sabotaging his multi-million-dollar book deal, Hollywood and political circles instantly lit up. This wasn't just another celebrity squabble or tabloid rumor. It was a direct accusation that Melania Trump herself had tried to silence him, and according to Wolff, she'd done it in the most calculated way possible. For years, Michael Wolff has been known as the man who writes the books that make powerful people sweat. He's the author behind Fire and Fury, the explosive tell-all about Donald Trump's White House that sparked outrage, legal threats, and endless cable news debates. But his newest project, The Art of Her Deal, The Untold Story of Melania Trump, Redux, was supposed to be different. It aimed to uncover the side of Melania that few people ever see, the woman behind the photo ops, behind the perfectly measured smiles, and behind the quiet elegance that once captured the world's attention. Yet before the book could even reach shelves, everything fell apart. Wolff claims Melania didn't just dislike the idea of his book, she went to war against it. In his legal complaint, he says she maliciously interfered with his publishing deal, spreading false claims that he fabricated interviews and made up stories for profit. According to him, her team allegedly launched a behind-the-scenes campaign to destroy his credibility, threatening media outlets and scaring off distributors. Those threats, Wolff says, cost him millions in lost international sales and nearly killed the project entirely. To make matters worse, he says he has receipts. In his court filing, Wolff included what he describes as emails, legal letters, and messages from PR firms acting under Melania's direct instruction. These firms, he claims, reached out to journalists, publishers, and international distributors, warning them not to engage with his book or face potential lawsuits themselves. If true, it's a bold move that blurs the line between personal defense and professional intimidation. But for Wolff, this isn't just about money. It's about his reputation. He argues that Melania's actions painted him as a fraud and a liar, someone who invents stories for headlines. To a writer whose brand depends on credibility, that's career suicide. And that's why he's taking her to court, demanding that a judge officially declare his reporting non-defamatory, while also seeking damages if Melania's alleged campaign to block him continues. Of course, Melania's camp sees it differently. Her lawyers have already fired back, calling Wolff's claims baseless, malicious, and fabricated. They say he's using her name for publicity, dragging an innocent woman into yet another cycle of media exploitation. So far, her team hasn't commented beyond legal statements, but insiders suggest they're preparing a strong counterattack, one that could flip the entire narrative on its head. Whether you believe Wolff's accusations or Melania's defense, one thing is certain. This lawsuit has reignited public fascination with the most private First Lady in modern history. And as the court filings unfold, the question isn't just what Melania did, but why. Because behind this legal drama, there's a deeper story, one that may reveal more about power, silence, and image than either side ever intended. Michael Wolff isn't new to controversy. In fact, it's practically his trademark. The man has built a career out of exposing the inner chaos of the rich and powerful, often stepping into battles most journalists would rather avoid. From his early magazine columns to his best-selling books about the Trump White House, Wolff has always operated in the gray area between fearless reporting and provocative storytelling. And that's exactly why this latest legal showdown with Melania Trump feels like the climax of a career defined by controversy. To understand why Wolff refuses to back down, you have to look at his history. He's been called reckless by some and brilliant by others. His first major spotlight moment came with Fire and Fury, a tell-all that painted Donald Trump's administration as dysfunctional and chaotic. It was a publishing sensation and a political nightmare for the White House. Lawsuits were threatened, media outlets debated his sources, and bookstores couldn't keep copies on shelves. But through it all, Wolff stood by every word. He thrived on the chaos. That's the same defiance he's bringing now against Melania. When news broke that Melania's legal team had allegedly pressured outlets not to cover his new book, Wolff didn't retreat. He doubled down. In interviews, he accused her of trying to erase uncomfortable truths from public view. According to him, she was terrified not of lies, but of what the truth might reveal. And while her lawyers called that claim nonsense, Wolff saw it as proof that he'd struck a nerve. "You don't try to stop something," he told one outlet, "unless you're worried about what's inside it." But this time, the stakes are different. Wolff isn't just fighting for attention or sales, he's fighting for credibility. Melania's team accused him of making up sources, intimidating interviewees, and spreading falsehoods. To most authors, those accusations would be devastating. But Wolff responded in the only way he knows how, with more confrontation. He claims to have documentation that refutes her legal threats, showing patterns of behind-the-scenes influence meant to silence him. Whether that's true or not remains to be seen. But the very idea has kept media outlets buzzing. This isn't the first time Wolff has been accused of crossing ethical lines. Critics say his writing often blends fact and interpretation so tightly that it's hard to separate one from the other. Yet his supporters argue that's exactly what makes his work compelling. He exposes not just what people do, but how power actually feels. In a world where access journalism often means playing nice with public figures, Wolff plays by different rules: provoke, expose, repeat. Still, this fight with Melania Trump could be the one that defines or destroys his legacy. If he wins, it might cement his image as the journalist who refused to be silenced, even by one of the most powerful women in the world. But if he loses, it could reinforce every criticism ever thrown at him, that he sensationalizes stories for profit, that he blurs truth for drama, and that his credibility was always paper-thin. As the legal documents circulate and both sides prepare for court, one thing is becoming clear. Michael Wolff isn't going anywhere quietly. For him, this isn't just a legal fight, it's personal. It's about protecting his name, his work, and his right to tell stories that make people uncomfortable. Because in Wolff's world, controversy isn't the cost of journalism. It's the proof that he's doing it right. 3. Image. Every storm has an origin, and in this case, it started with one article. A few sentences that would ignite one of the messiest media battles of the year. Months before the lawsuit, Michael Wolff made comments to the Daily Beast that sent shockwaves through both political and celebrity circles. He claimed Melania Trump was very involved in the Jeffrey Epstein scandal and hinted she might even be the missing link between Epstein and former President Donald Trump. Within hours, that story went viral. Within days, it was being deleted. The Daily Beast quietly retracted the piece after receiving a scathing legal letter from Melania's attorneys, calling Wolff's statements baseless fabrications. They demanded an immediate apology and accused the journalist of spreading malicious lies for attention. According to reports, Melania's legal team didn't just stop there. They allegedly contacted multiple news outlets, warning them not to repeat or quote Wolff's claims unless they wanted to face legal action themselves. The message was clear: cross this line, and there will be consequences. That's when things started to spiral. In Wolff's eyes, this wasn't just a retraction. It was a targeted campaign to destroy his professional credibility. He says Melania's team orchestrated a shadow operation, using intimidation to scare off anyone who might distribute or promote his upcoming book. Suddenly, publishers overseas began hesitating. Distributors pulled back, and his project, The Art of Her Deal, the untold story of Melania Trump, Redux, was hanging by a thread. Millions of dollars in potential revenue evaporated overnight. For Wolff, this was proof that Melania was actively trying to silence him. In his lawsuit, he accuses her of malicious interference, not just defending her reputation, but weaponizing it. He insists that the public has a right to read what he uncovered, and that her efforts to suppress the book only confirm she has something to hide. "The louder the denials," Wolff reportedly said to a colleague, the closer you are to the truth. Whether that's courage or arrogance depends on who you ask. Melania's side, of course, paints a very different picture. Her lawyers argue that Wolff crossed ethical and moral boundaries by making reckless, defamatory statements that linked her to one of the darkest scandals in modern American history. They insist there was no conspiracy, just a woman protecting her name from a journalist who thrives on controversy. Freedom of the press, one of her representatives said, does not mean freedom to invent. In their view, Wolff wasn't silenced. He was held accountable. What makes this particular clash so explosive is that both narratives carry weight. Wolff's history of provocative reporting means he's no stranger to criticism. But Melania's reputation for privacy and her near-total silence since leaving the White House have made her an enigmatic figure, one who rarely engages publicly. So when she does take legal action, people notice. And this time, her move has reignited speculation about what Wolff's book might contain that made her react so strongly. Whether it's truth, rumor, or a mix of both, this scandal has become bigger than the story itself. It's about control, over image, over narrative, and over who gets to tell the story of one of the most mysterious women in modern politics. By the time the lawsuit officially hit the court docket, it was clear this wasn't going to be a simple defamation case. It was turning into a full-blown legal chess match between two people who know how to play the media just as well as the law. On one side stood Michael Wolff, the sharp-tongued journalist famous for peeling back the glossy layers of the elite. On the other stood Melania Trump, a woman who had spent years perfecting silence as her strongest defense. But this time both were speaking, not with interviews or headlines, but with legal filings, evidence lists, and public statements dripping with accusation. In his complaint, Wolff paints a picture of deliberate sabotage. He claims that Melania Trump and her representatives personally instructed a public relations firm to contact publishers, distributors, and media outlets with one mission: to stop his book by any means necessary. According to him, these communications weren't random. They were strategic. Part of what he describes as a coordinated campaign to discredit and intimidate. His filing even includes letters and emails that, he says, prove a clear link between Melania's team and the threats sent to his business partners. But Melania's side has its own strategy, one rooted in precision and legal restraint. Her attorneys quickly filed responses dismissing Wolff's claims as a publicity stunt, designed to generate buzz for a book that publishers had already lost confidence in. They argue that the supposed evidence is nothing more than correspondence between lawyers doing their job, protecting a client's name from defamatory material. To them, Wolff's accusations are simply an attempt to turn legitimate defense into a conspiracy theory. Behind closed doors, sources close to both camps say the tension is high. Wolff's legal team is pushing for a court declaration affirming that his book does not contain defamatory statements, a rare and bold move that essentially asks the court to pre-approve his narrative. If granted, it would protect him from future lawsuits once the book is released. Meanwhile, Melania's lawyers are seeking to have the case dismissed altogether, arguing that Wolff's statements about her supposed Epstein connection were not protected journalism, but reckless defamation. It's a high-stakes battle that could reshape how far public figures can go to stop stories they consider damaging. Legal experts watching the case note that both sides are treading on thin ice. Wolff's history of stretching facts makes his credibility a target, while Melania's reputation for privacy could make discovery, the phase where both sides share internal documents, deeply uncomfortable. If the case moves forward, her communications and PR instructions could come under scrutiny, potentially revealing how much influence she really has behind the scenes. For someone as guarded as Melania, that's a nightmare scenario. Still, both camps seem ready for a long fight. Wolff's team wants to prove that he's being punished for telling the truth, while Melania's lawyers see this as a test of principle, a moment to defend her integrity from sensationalist attacks. The outcome could set a precedent for how celebrity figures respond to exposés in the post-White House era, where every word and rumor can go viral in seconds. As the filings continue, neither side is backing down. Every motion, every leaked email, every courtroom whisper adds fuel to an already blazing media fire. What started as a publishing dispute has now evolved into something much bigger, a test of truth, power, and who gets to control the story. 5. Image. In the world of politics and celebrity, silence can be the most powerful weapon and the most costly. For years, Melania Trump has mastered the art of saying little and revealing even less. Her quiet demeanor became her armor in a world where every word can ignite a storm. But now that silence is being tested. Michael Wolff's lawsuit isn't just dragging her name into court. It's forcing her to defend her privacy in a way she's never had to before. Wolff, on the other hand, thrives in noise. His career was built on controversy, on the chaos that follows when powerful people realize he's writing about them. From his explosive Fire and Fury to other White House tell-alls, Wolff has always danced along the edge between journalism and provocation. But this time, the target wasn't a president or an administration. It was a woman who had spent her entire public life avoiding the spotlight. And that's where things get dangerous, for both of them. Behind the scenes, Melania's team is furious. Sources close to her say she views this lawsuit as an attack not just on her reputation, but on her family. The allegations tying her to Jeffrey Epstein, claims Wolff made during a Daily Beast interview, were, in her view, beyond the bounds of decency. To her, this wasn't journalism. It was a calculated smear. Her lawyers wasted no time firing back, calling Wolff's statements categorically false, malicious, and defamatory. They demanded he retract his comments and issue a public apology, something Wolff has flatly refused to do, and that refusal comes at a price. By standing his ground, Wolff has effectively invited a legal war he might not be able to afford. His lawsuit claims he's already lost millions in publishing deals, international distribution, and media opportunities. Several global partners reportedly backed out after Melania's representatives warned of potential litigation if the book went forward. To Wolff, this was a targeted takedown. To Melania's camp, it was the natural consequence of spreading lies. But beneath the courtroom drama lies a deeper question. Who really controls the narrative in modern America? The journalist who digs up the truth, or the celebrity who has the power to silence it? In this battle, Melania's silence speaks volumes. She doesn't give interviews. She doesn't tweet. She doesn't respond to rumors. Instead, her lawyers, her PR team, and her carefully chosen words do the talking. Every move is precise. Every statement is filtered. Every appearance is calculated to maintain the image of grace and distance she's cultivated since her days in the White House. Yet that very silence can also be a double-edged sword. The less she says, the more others say for her. The vacuum invites speculation, and speculation breeds scandal. As Wolff's legal filings circulate across social media, his narrative begins to gain traction. Has Melania really interfered with his publishing deal? Did she personally order the threats to media outlets? No one knows for sure, but the questions themselves are enough to keep the story alive. For Wolff, that's the victory he wanted. For Melania, it's the price she pays for refusing to play the game. Silence may protect her from missteps, but it can't protect her from perception. And in the court of public opinion, perception is everything. As the legal battle deepens, both sides are learning the same harsh lesson. The truth isn't always what's proven in court, it's what people believe outside of it. When the lawsuit hit the headlines, it wasn't just a court case, it was a spectacle. Every major outlet from TMZ to Variety splashed the story across their front pages. Michael Wolff sues Melania Trump. Within hours, social media turned it into a trending topic. Hashtags like Melania lawsuit and Wolff vs. Trump began circulating on X, formerly Twitter, with users splitting into two furious camps. Those who saw Wolff as a fearless truth-teller taking on power, and those who viewed him as a desperate provocateur attacking a woman who just wanted her privacy. The frenzy grew as more details trickled out. According to Wolff's filings, Melania's legal team had allegedly threatened several media outlets, some in Europe, others in the U.S., warning them against covering or promoting his upcoming book. One French distributor reportedly backed out after receiving what they described as a veiled legal warning. That same day, Wolff's attorney sent copies of these communications to the press, calling them evidence of a coordinated intimidation campaign. Within hours, every gossip site, political blog, and cable news segment was dissecting the claims. Meanwhile, Melania's representatives maintained a calm front. A statement from her attorney read, "Mr. Wolff's allegations are false, defamatory, and a transparent attempt to generate publicity for a failing book project." They insisted Melania had no involvement in any behind-the-scenes pressure campaign and accused Wolff of fabricating the entire story for attention. The irony? That very denial became fuel for more coverage. Every time Melania tried to shut down the conversation, the media machine turned louder. For tabloids, this was gold. The elegant and elusive First Lady versus the notorious scandal writer, it had all the ingredients of a modern-day soap opera. Late-night hosts joked about it. TikTok creators made dramatic reenactments of the alleged phone calls. Reddit threads exploded with speculation about what Wolff's evidence might reveal. One viral post on our pop culture chat asked bluntly, "If Melania really has nothing to hide, why go this far to stop the book?" But behind all the noise, both sides were privately unraveling. Insiders close to Wolff said he was furious that major publishing houses were now hesitant to touch the project, fearing legal backlash. He reportedly spent weeks shopping the manuscript around, only to be met with polite rejections. Some publishers, afraid of the Trump brand's legal muscle, didn't even return his calls. For a man whose career thrived on controversy, this was a new kind of defeat, not one fought in headlines, but in closed-door meetings. Melania, on the other hand, was reportedly exhausted by the renewed spotlight. Having spent years rebuilding her image after leaving Washington, she now found herself once again dragged into the swamp of public scandal. Friends told Page Six that she resents being pulled into Wolff's circus and that the whole ordeal feels like a betrayal of her privacy. Even those within Trump circles reportedly advised her to stay silent and let her lawyers handle everything, advice she seemed content to follow. But the public, ever hungry for drama, wasn't letting go. Each new update about court filings, leaked emails, or speculative claims fed the narrative that something bigger was brewing beneath the surface. For every denial from Melania's team, Wolff dropped another insinuation. For every accusation of defamation, his supporters shouted, "Free speech." By the end of the week, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a legal dispute. It was a war for public perception. And in that war, truth often comes second to momentum. Wolff had successfully turned his lawsuit into a media storm, ensuring that even if his book never hit shelves, his story would still dominate headlines. For Melania, the challenge was different. She had to weather the storm without saying a word, trusting that silence would protect her once again. But as the chaos raged online, one question lingered in every headline. 7 image as the lawsuit rippled across media circles. The aftershocks hit harder than anyone expected. What started as a legal skirmish between Michael Wolff and Melania Trump quickly turned into a global headline war. Suddenly, every podcast, news panel, and gossip show had something to say. Not about policy or politics, but about the mysterious First Lady and the man who dared to write her story. Behind the scenes, publishing executives whispered about the case in hushed tones. One insider told Variety that no one wanted to be the next target of Trump's legal team. The chilling effect was immediate. Distributors backed off, PR agents distanced themselves, and Wolff's book deal, once worth millions, was now a ghost. But instead of backing down, Wolff doubled down. He began leaking small excerpts from his manuscript to journalists he trusted. Subtle, calculated moves to keep the story alive. Each new snippet hinted at a version of Melania the world had never seen. Powerful, guarded, and allegedly more involved in shaping her husband's image than anyone realized. Melania's camp, however, remained unshaken in their stance. Through brief, measured statements, her spokesperson dismissed Wolff's baseless fantasies and framed him as a desperate writer chasing relevance. Yet privately, sources close to her admitted the situation had struck a nerve. The lawsuit wasn't just about money, it was about control. Melania, who had spent years carefully curating a public image of mystery and elegance, now faced a narrative she couldn't manage. For someone who thrived on silence, being dragged into a loud public fight was the last thing she wanted. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best, turn chaos into spectacle. TikTokers dramatized deleted passages from Wolff's book, while Reddit users dissected his claims like detectives. The more Melania's team tried to shut things down, the more viral the story became. Screenshots of alleged letters, clips from old interviews, and speculative timelines flooded the web. Even Wolff's critics couldn't deny it. He had reignited public curiosity about one of the most private figures in recent American history. But every storm has its consequence. By late October, analysts on CNN Entertainment reported that Wolff's lawsuit had opened a legal gray zone around preemptive defamation. Experts debated whether Melania's alleged actions, contacting PR firms and distributors, actually crossed the line into illegal interference or were just standard damage control. Some suggested Wolff's case might set a precedent for future tell-all authors. Others said it could backfire spectacularly, painting him as a media opportunist rather than a whistleblower. In the Trump orbit, whispers grew louder. Insiders claimed former allies were urging Melania to settle quietly before the case unearthed more than she intended. After all, Wolff's filing referenced a missing link between Melania, Epstein, and Trump, a claim that, even if unproven, was enough to reignite old scandals. "It's not the truth that hurts them," one anonymous source told Page 6. "It's the reminder." Still, Melania didn't flinch. No interviews, no statements beyond her lawyer's carefully crafted words. She let the media swirl without feeding it, a strategy that had worked for her before. Yet this time felt different. The internet had evolved. Silence wasn't seen as grace anymore. It looked like guilt. And that's what made Wolff's lawsuit so potent. Whether he won in court or not, he had already succeeded in the court of public opinion. People were talking again, not about the former First Lady's fashion or charity work, but about the shadows around her past. By the time the noise began to settle, one reality had become crystal clear. Both Melania and Wolff had gambled their reputations, but only one could walk away untarnished. And as reporters gathered outside the courthouse for the next hearing, one question echoed across every outlet. Was this really about truth? Or revenge disguised as journalism? Months after the lawsuit began, the courtroom had become a stage for one of the most bizarre showdowns in recent memory, a best-selling author versus a former First Lady. Every hearing drew cameras, reporters and curious onlookers hoping for a glimpse of Melania Trump. Yet, as always, she remained distant. No public appearances, no interviews, only her lawyers speaking on her behalf, calm and cold as marble. Michael Wolff, on the other hand, relished the attention. He arrived each day with a quiet smirk, clutching his notes and whispering to his attorney as paparazzi shouted his name. He claimed the case wasn't about fame or money, it was about principle, about his right to tell the truth. But to outsiders, it was hard to tell where conviction ended and showmanship began. After all, Wolff had built his entire career on controversy. Now he was living inside one. Inside the courtroom, the tension was thick. Wolff's legal team presented emails, letters, and statements they claimed proved Melania's involvement in sabotaging his publishing deal. They described a coordinated PR operation meant to frighten media outlets and smear his credibility before the book even hit shelves. But Melania's lawyers fired back, calling his evidence flimsy, circumstantial, and clearly intended to manufacture headlines. They argued that Melania had every right to protect herself from defamation, that stopping lies wasn't interference. It was self-defense. For weeks, the case dragged on, each side landing subtle jabs through the press. Public opinion, meanwhile, was deeply divided. Some saw Wolff as a modern-day David taking on Goliath. Others believed he had gone too far, crossing ethical lines in his pursuit of fame. Still, the intrigue around Melania only grew stronger. Her silence became her power, and her mystery, her armor. When the judge finally delivered the preliminary ruling, it was a mixed bag. The court denied Wolff's request for a sweeping declaration that his book was non-defamatory, stating that such claims could only be tested after publication. However, the judge also refused to dismiss Wolff's claim of tortious interference, meaning his allegation that Melania deliberately sabotaged his deal could move forward. Both sides spun the outcome as a win. Wolff's camp called it validation. Melania's lawyers described it as a step toward exposing a publicity stunt for what it really is. But outside the courtroom, something far more important was happening. The book itself had leaked. A partial manuscript began circulating among journalists and insiders, and within days, excerpts hit the internet. One chapter, allegedly describing Melania's life before meeting Donald Trump, set social media on fire. People couldn't tell if it was real or fake, but it didn't matter. It was viral gold. Wolff's name was everywhere again, and his story had taken on a life of its own. The fallout was brutal. Major networks debated whether the leak was intentional. Trump's allies condemned Wolff as obsessed, while critics said Melania had overplayed her hand, turning a small book into a global talking point. In a twist of irony, her attempt to silence him had only amplified his voice. As the dust settled, both sides retreated. Wolff to his next headline, Melania to her silence. The lawsuit remained in limbo, a half-finished story still echoing in newsrooms and comment sections. But the real victory wasn't legal. It was psychological. Wolff had exposed the cracks in Melania's perfectly polished image, and Melania had reminded the world that even silence can be a weapon. In the end, no one truly won. Wolff's reputation was stained, Melania's mystery deepened, and the public, always hungry for scandal, moved on to the next controversy. Yet one line from Wolff's leaked manuscript continued to circulate online. She learned early that silence isn't weakness, it's power. Because while everyone else is shouting, the one who says nothing controls the room. And maybe, in the strange war between exposure and secrecy, Melania Trump had already won long before anyone realized. An image. When the courtroom lights faded and the headlines began to quiet, Melania Trump did what she's always done best. She vanished. No interviews, no statements, no Instagram posts, just silence. To the public, it looked like retreat. But those who knew her understood. It was strategy. Melania's greatest weapon had never been her words. It was her ability to disappear when the world got too loud. Behind closed doors, however, the fallout from Michael Wolff's lawsuit was real. Sources close to her told Page 6 that Melania became even more guarded, limiting her circle to a few loyal friends and longtime aides. She doesn't trust easily anymore, one insider revealed. This lawsuit reminded her how quickly people can twist your story for their own benefit. For someone who had spent years being defined by others, first as a model, then as Mrs. Trump, and later as the most enigmatic First Lady, the incident only deepened her desire to control her narrative. But controlling it became harder than ever. The leaked excerpts from Wolff's book continued to circulate online, morphing into memes, TikTok clips, and speculative Reddit threads. People began revisiting old photos, past interviews, and speeches, searching for hidden clues about the real Melania. Was she the cold, calculating figure Wolff described? Or a misunderstood woman caught in a never-ending political storm? Every theory only added to her myth. Meanwhile, Wolff capitalized on the chaos. Though his book deal had collapsed, the controversy gave him something just as valuable: relevance. He appeared on late-night shows, hinting that the full story would eventually come out. Some critics accused him of exploiting Melania's image to keep himself in the spotlight. Others praised him for daring to challenge one of the most secretive women in American politics. Either way, both names, Melania and Wolff, were now permanently linked in pop culture's Hall of Scandal. For Melania, rebuilding her image became a slow, deliberate process. In early interviews following the court drama, her team focused on philanthropy and fashion, quietly steering attention back to her work with children's causes and her personal brand. Yet, even those efforts carried a shadow. Every public appearance now came with whispers about the book she tried to stop. The lawsuit may not have broken her, but it had cracked the glass around her perfect image. Interestingly, her popularity among certain audiences actually grew. To some, Melania became a symbol of restraint in an era of oversharing, a woman who refused to give her enemies the satisfaction of a reaction. Her ability to maintain poise while being dissected by the press earned her a strange kind of respect. She doesn't play the victim, one journalist wrote in Vanity Fair. She plays the mystery, and in doing so, she wins. Still, there was a cost. Insiders claimed Melania became increasingly distant, even within her family circle. She spent long stretches at her private residences, focusing on her son Barron and avoiding social events. The lawsuit had reinforced her worst fears about the media, that no matter what she did, her silence would always be filled by someone else's story. As for Wolff, the man who set the fire, he eventually faded into the background again. New scandals replaced his, new books dominated the news cycle, but the damage had been done. The words Melania Trump and tell-all would forever share the same sentence, and though she never publicly addressed the case, one thing became clear through her actions. She had learned to use her mystery as both shield and sword. By the end of it all, Melania emerged not as the victim or the villain, but as the enigma. A woman who refused to be defined even when the world demanded answers. She didn't clear her name. She didn't need to. In her silence, she had already reclaimed control. Because in a world addicted to noise, the quietest person often holds the most power. Time has a strange way of reshaping scandals. What once dominated headlines eventually fades into memory, but for Melania Trump, the lawsuit with Michael Wolff didn't just disappear. It evolved into something much bigger. It became a turning point in how the world saw her. The tell-all war wasn't just about a book anymore. It was about power, privacy, and perception in an era where fame and silence can be equally dangerous. In the months following the chaos, Melania seemed to undergo a quiet transformation. Her public appearances grew even rarer, but each one carried an unmistakable air of control. When she did step out, whether at a charity gala or a rare political event, her presence spoke louder than words. Reporters noted the same calm expression, the same measured grace, but there was something different now. A harder edge, as if she'd built invisible walls no one could breach. The lawsuit had taught her that vulnerability had no place in her world. Every smile, every statement, every silence had to be deliberate. Meanwhile, Hollywood and political circles couldn't stop dissecting her. Documentaries, podcasts, and think pieces tried to define her legacy. Was she a misunderstood private woman or a calculating strategist who mastered the art of disappearing in plain sight? The answers varied depending on who you asked. Some saw her as a tragic figure, trapped in a life she didn't choose. Others admired her as the ultimate image of composure, someone who outlasted every critic by simply refusing to play their game. Michael Wolff's own reputation never fully recovered. Though his name resurfaced with new projects, the Melania saga remained a cautionary tale, proof that even the most controversial journalist could find himself outmaneuvered by the one person he tried to expose. In interviews, he occasionally referenced the case, framing it as a battle over truth and censorship. But the more he talked, the more people seemed to admire Melania's silence. The irony was undeniable. His words made her mystery grow stronger. By 2025, the lawsuit had become more of a cultural memory than a legal matter. It was studied in media ethics classes and discussed in think pieces about the price of privacy. But for Melania, it wasn't theory. It was survival. Friends say she emerged from the ordeal with a deeper understanding of fame's double edge. She realized that being quiet isn't the same as being powerless, one former aide told Vanity Fair. It's her version of control. She lets the world talk, while she decides what to reveal and when. And maybe that's the lasting legacy of it all. In a culture obsessed with oversharing, Melania Trump became the outlier, the celebrity who refused to explain herself. The lawsuit may have momentarily exposed her name to controversy, but in the end, it also solidified her myth. She became a symbol of selective silence, a woman who understood that mystery, once mastered, can be more powerful than any truth. The irony of the entire saga is almost cinematic. Michael Wolff tried to tell her story. But by fighting him, Melania wrote her own, not in words, but in the spaces between them. The lawsuit wasn't her downfall. It was her evolution. She walked away untouchable, unreachable, and more fascinating than ever. Because in the end, scandals fade. Books are forgotten, but mystique, real, unbreakable mystique, never dies. And that may be Melania Trump's greatest victory of all. 11 Image. The cameras have long moved on. The reporters chasing quotes have found new scandals, new stars, new stories to feed the endless cycle of noise. But somewhere behind the marble walls of a Florida estate, Melania Trump lives quietly, far from the chaos she once seemed trapped in. No book tours, no press conferences, no tell-alls, just calm, just distance. Every now and then, her name resurfaces. A new rumor, a new photo, a new theory about what she's really thinking. But she never answers. And that perhaps is her genius. In a world that demands constant explanation, she offers only mystery. The less she speaks, the more the world leans in to listen. The lawsuit with Michael Wolff, once front-page drama, has now become a symbol. Not of legal victory or loss, but of survival. It revealed a truth few are willing to admit. In the age of exposure, silence is not weakness. It's armor. Where Wolff tried to define her through words, Melania defined herself through absence. She didn't need to win the case in court. She won it in perception. Insiders say she spends most of her days with her son, Barron, keeping her world small and her peace intact. Occasionally, she steps into the spotlight, perfectly dressed, perfectly poised, reminding the world she's still here, still untouchable. And when she walks away again, she leaves behind the same unanswered question that's followed her for years. Who is Melania Trump, really? Maybe that's the point. Maybe she's not meant to be fully understood. Some figures live in history because of what they said, others because of what they refused to say. As the story of Michael Wolff's lawsuit fades into the archives of celebrity scandal, Melania's legacy remains sharper than ever, a silhouette of elegance and control in a culture addicted to chaos. The woman who outlasted every headline not by shouting louder, but by mastering the art of silence, because sometimes the most powerful story is the one you never tell.